Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, we are going to be breaking down what the analytics say, what the statistics say about which specializations are the most popular, throw in a little bit of opinion as well to which specializations I think are going to be able to deliver you success as we come in, maybe to the midway point of season 3 right now. And it looks like who knows if there's going to be any class changes for the rest of the season, given the massive undertaking that they are taking on with Midnight and the class reworks that are going on over there. Not to mention that they just announced that it is possible that World of Warcraft is going to be going on to consoles. So I think they're pretty dedicated to improving the baseline experience and simplifying the classes so that we can start playing it on controller, apparently. So this might just be with what we're sticking with, but also it's a good idea to just take note of if something did get changed, nerfed, or buffed. This type of data is likely going to indicate what type of direction that could go. So if you want to make sure that you're not making too risky of a bet, right? As far as which specialization is going to be the strongest option for you, then tuning into a type of video like this is going to be great. And as always, if you want to make sure you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash the subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. But let's get started. We're looking at the melee DPS first. We're going to be breaking it down based on all of the rating brackets from 1800 to 2800 plus. And you can see at 1800, the chart is heavily leaning into Retribution Paladin. When it comes to the leaderboard, you pretty much can't see a game without it. It's just really powerful, very durable, has a lot of diminishing returns, can tank interrupts for its teammates quite effectively, and just overall is really powerful. Just a very powerful option. This one's like the most obvious one in the room. But surprisingly, Arms Warrior is actually starting to take a pretty significant and sizable position in terms of representation. I was just playing some Moonkin Arms Warrior last night, and it feels like it is a very good option, especially if you are playing Colossus and you're focused on stacking versatility and making your characters tanky as possible. This type of build seems to be doing very well in the current meta. Havoc Demon Hunter was another obvious one, just very durable. I'd say its limitations, between Arms Warrior and Demon Hunter compared to Ret is limitations in range damage. Ret Paladin being able to do its full rotation basically from ranged with no significant downside means that these classes end up getting kited a lot, especially against hunters. It becomes a bit more difficult. Unholy DK, hey, you guys managed to survive without getting absolutely slaughtered as far as nerfs. I consider that a plus. Maybe they're going to finally leave you alone and they're going to stop bullying you. You might still have a decent ride. Fury Warrior starting to fall off a little bit more and more to Arms Warrior, and I think it's likely the durability comparison. I think the Colossus versatility stacking on Arms is starting to edge a bit ahead of Fury Warrior, so we start to see it starting to fall off. Assassination Rogue, I'm surprised to not see a larger uptick. I think that it is actually really strong. I think the only thing potentially holding it back is that it struggles into Paladins. Of which there are a lot at the moment, but it is definitely a strong option. I've really been enjoying mine. I've honestly been considering switching to Rogue as a main. I've been kind of in a weird phase of trying to figure out what it is that I want to main and what I want to play as far as content in the game, but I've been really enjoying Assassination Rogue. Survival Hunter's metrics seem still low, even considering how good it actually is at the moment. Maybe it's just because Marksman's a little bit easier with how much one-shot damage it has. Beast Mastery, you just can be ranged at all times, so some limitations there again compared to Survival Hunter. But I would say that this representation is not indicative of how good Survival Hunter actually is. Windwalker Monk seems to be just like in an okay path, where it's not really like overtaking anybody. It's starting to get overshadowed a little bit, I would say, but I would say that it's a solid option. I don't want to say it's like underrated, but it's still a solid option. Frosty K, you guys didn't dodge the nerfs that Unholy did. I don't know how you guys in that round of changes got nerfed harder than Rets did, but you did. So unfortunately, whoever wanted to bully Unholy DK, they've switched their attention to just only on Frosty K now. So Frosty K is still okay, but it's limitations given the fact that it's uncoordinated. It's a very comp specific specialization as far as how strong you're going to feel on it if you don't have the right synergies with like a Devastation Evoker, for example, to clump enemies together and kind of burst them down. It feels significantly weaker. Enhance is seeing an uptick. I think that the Ascendant Stormbringer build is actually a very good option in solo shuffle because most people don't shut it down, and you can absolutely just crank out a ton of damage. We see Enhancement Shaman self-healing also being very strong. So I would say Enhancement's probably a little underrated. Mobility is going to be its main issue. Feral Druid is remarkably low, considering we've seen Feral Druid win AWC like week to week or multiple finals. It's mostly because you're going to have to work like 3 times as hard as the Ret Paladin, I think, for your results, but you can get even better results, and I think we'll see that as we start climbing up some of the ranks. Subtlety Rogue, honestly, I was expecting Subtlety to be a bit lower. because I thought Outlaw was doing better, but I think Subtlety is just easier to play than Outlaw, and that might be why its representation is actually higher here at the 1800 plus. And then Outlaw Rogue, I think it's just because it's too complicated. I'm very curious to see how Outlaw Rogue's popularity is in Midnight when they start simplifying it. I still think it's one of the hardest melee even in this initial stage of simplification, but I think it's mostly its complexity, not so much its viability. But obviously Rogues having the issue of their stuns being DR'd by their teammates is a big deal, even though we see Rogues winning like every single AWC. Now as we climb up the ranks here of the leaderboard to try and see how this shuffles around, you can see Unholy DK starts to take a bit of a rise. I think it's mostly due to its range damage, and Assassination and Survival start to rise. So Warrior, Demon Hunter, a little bit better if you're like a beginner player, but as you start to climb up in more advanced ranks, you can see that DK and Assassination Rogue start to take over that of Warrior and Demon Hunter, but Ret still remains obviously at the same highest level. Demon Hunter catching up at 2700, and Feral Druid, look at this, Feral Druid starts taking a big turn. So Feral Druid is one of those specializations where if you invest into it, Unholy DK, Assassination, Feral Druid, if you invest into these, you're going to start to see some success. And I feel like it's unlikely that you're going to get nerfed out of all of the classes. Whereas Ret, who remains at the top, and even at the top, starts to become more equally competitive with everything else, likely is going to get nerfed. So that's why I think it's good to take all this information into consideration if you're making a choice or for trying to go for like an elite set or a gladiator push or whatever, a legend push at the end of the season. Taking in this data, given that they could make changes, and trying to make adjust your selection accordingly. Now when we jump over to range DPS, I do think things are going to look a little bit more balanced, honestly. When we look at 1800, Hunter specs about equal at 1800. Boomkin has been a really good pick. Actually, is probably one of the most underrated specs for the current patch. Destro's in a solid spot. Shadow's in a solid spot. Fire Mage, offense really good. Defense pretty squishy. Ellie seems just kind of average. I haven't seen like Ellie being completely dominant, but not terrible. So it's like a pretty good safe pick. Demonology seems to be kind of coming up. From the trenches a little bit. I think it's starting to do better and better. Arcane had a pretty significant fall off since it got a lot of nerfs targeting its Nether Flux in particular, but it's still holding solidly, especially when we consider that this is 1800, right? I expect the simple easy specs, which honestly, 100 specs into Boomkin are going to be some of the easiest range specs, and then more advanced ones like Arcane and Affliction to end up being at the bottom, just based on the fact that this is a lower rating threshold. You expect the easier specs to be at the top. So Arcane still holds solid even at this threshold. Affliction, even that honestly I think is holding solid at this threshold. Although I've been playing my Affliction lock, and there are definitely some situations where you're getting garroted 3 times where you just want to like throw your monitor over into the river or something, but it is definitely doing solid. Devastation Evoker, it's definitely an underrated one for Shuffle. I feel like Devastation Evoker is absolutely remarkable specialization at the moment. Just super underrated. Again, I brought it up in previous videos. It's likely the aesthetic. I wonder if they'll ever implement like a glyph of stars like Moonkins to be able to look like a visage form and shoot disintegrate from your hand like Iron Man or something, because I think that alone and just hover up above the ground like Iron Man, I feel like more people would be down to play that than the skinny lizard at the moment. Frostmage I think is having a little bit of an uprising. I think Frostmage has been very underrated. I don't think it's as remarkable obviously as the best specs, but definitely underrated. And then Og is honestly not too bad either. I think it's just people consider this kind of like a weird, I don't even know what type of joke I can make in 2025 to describe it, but it's definitely not as bad as this representation would indicate. So overall, when you're going for range selection, I would say that across the board, you're pretty good in all cases. I think Marksman, you're going to win games you don't deserve to win a lot of the times. Boomkin is definitely the easiest option in terms of that, and Beast Mastery Hunter as well. But when we climb the ranks, let's see what happens. How does this twist around and which specs end up on top? Beast Mastery, we see it about the same at 2100. Fire Mage maybe taking a little bit of a steep increase to the rest of the specializations as it passes Arcane Mage. And then when we get to 2400 plus, which is the top end of the ladder, still holds pretty steady as far as overall representation, with Fire continuing to catch up. And then when we look at the absolute highest part of the ladder, the 27, the 2800 threshold, Fire starts to really take over, but Marksman really holds strong as well. Destruction holds strong. And then when we get to the absolute highest point of the ladder, Marksman has a clear definitive upside here. So obviously Marksman looks like it's a pretty good low rating to high rating, but I also think Marksman would probably be the most likely to get nerfed if any changes were to come through. Fire Mage is a risky pick where you can see its representation is much lower at the lower ratings, but as it climbs up and you master it, it ends up being really good. Destruction is another one. I'm uncertain as to whether or not they would target for nerfs or not, but it seems like a decent pick. Beast Mastery overall, Boomkin overall seem like very good specializations. Shatter just holds consistent. Arcane holds consistent. And there's even some Warlock specs at the highest ends of the echelons of the ladder. Now, when we look at healers, I think this is going to be the biggest one, the biggest disparity, obviously. So we've got Marksman, Ret, and Discipline Priest as standouts, but I'm already kind of leaking some of the details here. I'm skipping too far ahead. When we look at 1800, Disc Priest, Resto Shaman, decently competitive with each other. Holy Paladin, decently competitive. Holy Priest, decently competitive. And poor Mistweavers, you guys just got kicked in the nuts, dude. Like, you guys, I don't know why they completely ripped you out of the game and they're okay with Disc Priest, because I feel like they should give Mistweaver some of its stuff back. It would have been fine. Preservation Evoker, holding decently solid, and then Resto Druid, I think, obviously the weakest option. Although a lot of players are starting to find new builds with Resto Druid that are seemingly doing better and better as time goes on. But I think people are having fun with Disc because it just does so much damage. You feel like you have more say in the outcome of the game, which is very important in terms of increasing role representation, which I do wonder if in Midnight they can, they're doing a big crowd control disarmament, right? Removing a lot of crowd control. I think ultimately healers should be the ones who have the most amount of crowd control for their teams. That should be like their main way of helping aid in ending the game. And then that way they feel like they're contributing to the end of the match and it's not just completely out of their control. But obviously Disc Priest is the most likely to get nerfed, I would think. Maybe Resto Shaman less likely, Holy Paladin definitely less likely. So if you're going kind of like that mid pick for safety as far as cutoffs, that could be a good maneuver on your part. But overall healers, other than Disc Priest having such high representation, I would say is okay. It's pretty decent. I think Mistweaver and Resto Druid just need a little bit of help. And it would be in a pretty good spot. Maybe Disc Priest. The main issue with Disc Priest is just Void Weaver. When you don't know how to play against it, completely dominates. But if you do understand its Mind Blast window, how to chain CC, stop it from casting, you can like shut it down and make it look very pathetic. It's just very hard to coordinate that with no voice comms, random compositions that might not be able to pull that off. So then it starts to dominate a little bit more, right? It's the same thing with Ret Paladin and Marksman Hunter, honestly, as well. In this solo queue environment where you're not getting rotationally denied on everything you're trying to do or crowd controlled, you feel a lot weaker. Although Void Weaver has seen significant representation in the AWC, so I would say that it is leaking into both sides of it, but it does have counterplay, and I'm not trying to like justify how strong it is right now with this statement, but at the same time, I actually like how fast the queues have been because there's so many people playing healer, even if they're playing Disc Priest. So I am a bit worried about whether or not they're going to just like destroy you guys like you did monks, because look at the representation that happened to monks when they destroyed them, and then our queues get long. So this is a very delicate line. To me, the healer balance has always been what determines faster queues, which determines the health of the game. So I almost would rather they go from the buff up from Mistweaver and Resto Druid, buff up to where Void Weaver is, as opposed to going the other way around. But you can see that Void Weaver holds it steady, going from 1800 to 2100. And then we jump up into the 2400 category as soon as we get our little boom chickens loading here. Continues to hold steady. Preservation starts to take over a little bit more. Holy Priest starts to climb a little bit more. I think Holy Paladin is just one of the better beginner healers, and you can see it starts falling off a lot more as we start to get higher rated. And this is where the Resto Druids are coming up with new builds. You can see them starting to like kind of take over. So Holy Paladin, a good beginner spec, starts to fall off towards the top end. Void Weaver, if you dedicate your time, which I want to play a Void Weaver. I'm farming Conquest to make a Void Weaver because I main Disc. I've gotten rank 1 and Shuffle on it. I really like playing it. I do want to try this new Void Weaver because I have not got to touch it yet. I imagine it's probably going to end up getting nerfed as soon as I do touch it because that's what usually happens. But we will have to wait and see. But obviously Void Weaver, completely dominant throughout all rating thresholds, likely means that it's going to get nerfed pretty significantly. But if you go for any of the mid-range healers, Holy Priest, Shaman, Paladin, I think it's fairly unlikely that they would get nerfed. And they are definitely able to compete, at least even right now, with Void Weaver's current iteration. So regardless, I'm still having fun, even with Marksman Hunter, Disc Priest, and Ret Paladin, which we can see once we look at the overall, kind of dominating in the bracket, mostly due to the limitations of the bracket. Their toolkit is the strongest in those types of circumstances, but also a little bit of imbalance, right? I'm not an aim shot proc, just two-tapping you. It's not super enjoyable or engaging in that regard. So I'm curious to see where they take the tuning, if they're going to take it anywhere, if they're just going to leave it as it is, because I've been getting some very respectably fast queues recently with Void Weaver as it is. I think mostly propping that up. I think it would be better for them to look at the healers that are underperforming, like these guys down here, buff them up so that we can get even more faster queues, so that the healers feel competitive. Because that's one thing that could end up happening that could be bad if they don't make changes, is that anyone who doesn't play a Disc Priest is just going to be like, I can't beat a Void Reaver, I quit and I give up. So when the imbalance is a little bit too hard on one healer, that ends up drying out the queues later on to people who don't want to re-roll. That's the only thing really to take away as far as like serious consequences of if they didn't make any changes to the classes. But that's it for the breakdown here, this meta-analysis of the War Within Season 3. I do want to make more videos for Midnight. I'm going to be looking at dungeon content, looking at PP content when I can get it. I don't know if we're going to have to wait to the beta phase when more people have access to the beta in order to get any sort of significant testing in that regard. So it's probably going to be a little bit more focused on dungeon tuning, trying to figure out what's going on there as far as the pruning, because it seems like they're probably going to have to commit to this decision for Midnight if they want to get it on console. That's a very big implication to it. But I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Thank you guys very much for watching and supporting the channel as always, and I will see you in the next one.